Avoidants have an uncanny ability to identify exactly who could transform them into emotionally healthy, truly happy people, and then run from those people as fast as their psychology will carry them. It's not that they don't recognize transformative love when they see it. It's that they recognize it too clearly and understand exactly what accepting that love would require from them. They run from life-changing people because changing their life feels more terrifying than staying stuck in familiar dysfunction. They can spot their healers from miles away. Avoidants have developed sophisticated radar for identifying people who possess the specific combination of patience, emotional intelligence, unconditional love, and healing energy that could actually repair their wounded attachment systems. They recognize their potential saviors immediately because these people trigger every alarm bell in their defensive psychology. These life-changing people share certain characteristics that avoidants find simultaneously irresistible and terrifying. They see through defensive facades. They love authentically without conditions. They have the emotional capacity to handle avoidant patterns without becoming victims. And they believe in growth potential that avoidants don't believe they possess. The recognition is instant and visceral because their nervous system responds differently to people who could actually help them heal versus people who enable their dysfunction. Their bodies know the difference between someone who would challenge them to grow and someone who would allow them to stay broken. Transformation requires death of their current identity. Life-changing people represent the death of everything avoidants have built their identity around. Being truly loved by someone transformative would require them to stop being the mysterious, emotionally unavailable person who's too complex for ordinary love and become someone capable of reciprocal, vulnerable, authentic connection. This identity transformation feels like psychological death because they don't know who they would be without their avoidant patterns, their emotional walls, and their carefully maintained independence. Their entire sense of self has been constructed around being someone who doesn't need anyone, and healing would require admitting they need everything. The fear isn't just about changing. It's about losing themselves completely and becoming someone they don't recognize. They'd rather stay broken and familiar than become healthy and unknown to themselves. They recognize their own potential, and it terrifies them. When avoidants encounter people who could change their lives, they catch glimpses of who they could become if they were brave enough to heal and grow. This vision of their potential self is both inspiring and absolutely terrifying because it shows them how much they're currently limiting themselves through their fear. Seeing their potential reflected in someone else's eyes forces them to acknowledge that their current limitations are choices rather than fixed personality traits. They could become emotionally available, vulnerable, and capable of deep love if they were willing to do the work. But doing the work requires facing everything they've spent their lives avoiding. This recognition of their own unrealized potential creates cognitive dissonance between who they are and who they could be. Running from transformative people allows them to avoid confronting this gap and the responsibility that comes with recognizing their capacity for change. Healing requires facing their worst traumas. Life-changing people create enough emotional safety for avoidants to access and process their deepest wounds. But this therapeutic potential is exactly why they run. They know intuitively that being truly loved by someone safe would bring all their buried trauma to the surface for healing. The love that could heal them would also force them to feel everything they've been avoiding: childhood abandonment, betrayal, emotional neglect, and the grief of never having been loved safely before. This emotional excavation feels more dangerous than staying numb and disconnected. They run because they understand that transformation through love isn't just about receiving good treatment. It's about facing the reality of how poorly they've been treated in the past and processing the pain they've been carrying for years. They fear becoming dependent on their healing source. Avoidants recognize that people who could change their lives would become psychologically essential to their well-being in ways that conflict with their need for independence. They fear that accepting transformative love would make them dependent on the person providing it. This dependency terror stems from their core wound around abandonment. If they allowed someone to become essential to their healing and happiness, losing that person would feel like psychological annihilation. It feels safer to reject the healing than to risk being healed and then abandoned. They convince themselves that remaining self-sufficient in their brokenness is preferable to becoming dependent on someone else for their emotional health, even when that dependence could lead to eventual independence through genuine healing. They don't believe they deserve transformation. Deep in their unconscious, avoidants don't believe they deserve the kind of love that could actually change their lives. They've internalized messages that they're fundamentally flawed, unworthy of genuine care, and destined for emotional isolation as punishment for their inherent inadequacy. When transformative love appears, it conflicts with their core belief system about their own worth. Accepting that level of care would require them to believe they deserve good things, which contradicts everything they've learned about themselves from their earliest relationships. Running from life-changing people allows them to maintain their familiar sense of unworthiness, rather than challenging themselves to believe they might actually deserve the love and healing they've always wanted. The effort required feels impossible. Avoidants understand intuitively that being worthy of transformative love would require sustained emotional effort they've never learned to provide. They would need to communicate vulnerably, process emotions healthily, reciprocate care consistently, and maintain intimacy without retreating into familiar defensive patterns. This level of emotional labor feels overwhelming to someone who's spent their entire life minimizing effort in relationships. The work required for transformation seems impossible when they have no experience with healthy emotional regulation or authentic vulnerability. They run because accepting life-changing love means accepting the responsibility to become someone capable of receiving and reciprocating that love, which feels like an impossible standard to maintain long-term. They choose familiar pain over unknown healing. Ultimately, avoidants run from transformative people because familiar dysfunction feels safer than unknown healing. They know how to manage their current level of pain, but they have no idea how to navigate genuine happiness and emotional health. They run from the people who could change their lives because changing their lives would require them to become completely different people. And that transformation feels more terrifying than staying stuck in patterns that guarantee their continued suffering.